Hey everybody, and welcome to the first day of qRules training. So I went through the first half of training today without recording, and I'm going to go ahead and re-record this and then splice it into the live stuff. So there's going to be a few things that were in class that I'm going to sort of skate over, like stuff you need to sign into the training site and so on. But otherwise, I'm going to try to capture at least the main things we discussed during training so that we've got it here in the recording. I apologize for the gap there. So this first slide is just about our sign-in stuff in our training site. Here's the agenda we're using this go around for qRules. We're going to have a few different people presenting things. That meant we sort of mixed up the order of the labs. That does mean we hit a few of the more complex labs today, so that we can have some other labs available for Bree to present tomorrow. But this will let you kind of get to know the different people you may work with when you're using qRules, if you call for support, if you're on the forum, and so forth. So this gives you the general overview that we're going to go through for the training. Another thing I did during training that I didn't manage to record here, where we went through some polls, talked about what versions of InfoPath people are using, what versions of SharePoint people are using. And in general, it looked like most people were still using on-premises SharePoint 2010, but about half of the attendees were using InfoPath 2013. So people have been upgrading to a newer version of Office, even though their organization may not necessarily have upgraded to the latest version of SharePoint. I thought that was kind of interesting. Usually at the end of training, I like to give a little bit of a pep talk. I went ahead and moved it to the beginning of training this time since I didn't want to make somebody else give my pep talk. I just want to remind you that this stuff isn't too hard for you. If you've got the motivation to download and install a new product, if you've got the motivation to read through that long user guide, if you've got the motivation to find training and review it, this stuff is not too hard for you. Don't get frustrated. Don't think this stuff is too hard for you. It's not. You are smart enough. We all have a vast capacity to learn new things. We all have enormous resources that we can put towards learning new things. The secret I have found for me has been to understand how to troubleshoot things and to understand how to approach new things. And a lot of times that means breaking stuff down into simple steps, testing changes as you go, isolating the problem. If you can isolate those problems, then you have so much more ease in solving those problems. Don't take a haphazard approach to stuff. If something isn't working, don't just toss your hands in the air and say doesn't work. You have to isolate what isn't working so you have a chance of fixing it. One thing I mentioned during training that I want to make sure I mention again here in my re-recording is that when I'm working on something new, the first thing I find is what don't I know, right? Look at the picture, say this is the problem I'm trying to solve, these are the three pieces I don't know, and then as comforting and easy as it is to go tackle the stuff you know first, don't do that. Go figure out the stuff you don't know first, because those are the pieces that the project hinges on. Why would you want to get this whole beautiful form designed and then go back to your business user and say, yo man, so this is all done except for the really hard part and I still haven't figured that out. And then you've got 3 months of work to figure out the hard part. Prototype the hard part first and use a proof of concept approach and really quickly bash through, can I do this? No, I can't. Are there tools that would allow me to do this? Yes, there are. Or is there somebody else in our organization who might be able to do this? So do the ugly stuff first and it'll set you right on your way for the rest of it. If you're a qRules user, you already kind of know what the value proposition is here. The most important takeaway for you is that it gives you the leverage of code in your form without you having to write code. And I want you to know that we use it internally as well. We also use it in projects for our customers frequently. The main reasons we do that are the same reasons presented here. Number one, it takes us less time to develop. Number two, this code has already been tested. We don't have to retest the code. Number three, I can take my form and hand it off to a colleague who does not write code, and they can debug this form and they can troubleshoot it and they can make changes to it. Why? Because nothing is in that black box of code, right? Everything is in form logic. They can find it, they can fix it. Now, if you're a coder, fantastic. You can add these DLLs to your forms that have custom code and leverage them for the stuff you don't want to write code for. Because let me tell you what, you could not pay me. Well, you could, but I mean, Why would I write code to submit InfoPath stuff to a SharePoint list? I simply would not do that. It's so much cleaner and easier to just use qRules. Okay, so I encourage you to leverage qRules, even if you do write code. So here's the quick basics. You need to run setup.exe as an admin to install, at least in Windows 7. Close that form template before you inject it. Look, this is code. This is a code DLL. So if you're using InfoPath Form Services, you're going to need to admin approve or sandbox that form. Sandbox is available in SharePoint 2010 and 2013. We had a little discussion during training about which is better. And if you have somebody else who has to admin approve your template, you're going to find your debug process is a lot easier if you can just publish directly to the library. So in that case, I prefer Sandbox. The way the code works is there's a changed event on the command node, and what it does is it tries to do whatever you've told it to do, right? So you put text in the command node, whether you're typing it there, whether you're using a rule to populate it, whether you're clicking a button, you're putting some string value into the command node. The code in qRules is parsing that and trying to figure out what you want it to do. It's making its best attempt. Okay, you can leverage the success node in the qRules data source, or the errors node, or the new execution history group in order to do some error handling and some troubleshooting. For instance, you might want to have rules where after each qRules command that you execute, you check the success node and you don't progress your rules unless it's set to true. You might want to surface the value in the error node to your user if you think that when this command goes wrong, you need your user to take some action. Some commands return information to the results node. As of 4.3, we have data source. You can return information to data source nodes. There's some universal parameters, result XPath and result DS, I think it is. You can find those in your user manual, and those let you return values directly to form nodes instead of to the result node and then having another rule to set a form node. Okay, if you need dynamic information in your command, you'll use a concat formula. You'll see samples of those throughout the command overview where we say, here's a sample concat formula. So if you need dynamic commands, generally speaking, you're going to be passing in values using a concat formula. Otherwise, like let's say you're using the generate GUID command. You just type it into the value box. Okay, and you'll see some of this in Lab 1. Now, for InfoPath Form Services, you want to set post back to always on fields and buttons that execute commands. This is so that the form will post back to the server with the data that's changed in the form, and then the business logic, the code DLL, executes its code on the server and sends data back to the form. Okay, so we'll always set post back on those controls in InfoPath Form Services. If you only take one thing away from this training, aside from the fact that you can do anything and don't ever believe you can't, it would be that these commands are modular components that I want you to use like Legos. So anything you can imagine, I want you to try to build those with these commands. Put them together. Use them in sequence. Use them in a series. Use them all over your form in order to build what you need. Like I mentioned about error handling, you can add sophisticated programming level error handling using the error node and the success node. Don't let the number of commands freak you out, but some rainy afternoon when you've got some free time, I know most of us don't have free time, page through that command overview. Look through it. Get a sense of what's there. A few years back, I tried to organize them in what seemed to me to be kind of a logical manner. So hopefully there's some grouping in that command overview document that'll help you make sense of what all is there. In 5.2, we added this execution history group. I'm going to show you that. That keeps track of every command you've executed in this session with this form, and it also keeps track of any errors and results and success. Now there was a little bug there, and in 6.1 we've got it fixed. So in 5.2 we've got a little bug. Let's say you passed in a command that was copy insert /parent equals blah blahs, space /child equals blah, space count equals, etc. So you've got a full insert command. The execution history only shows the command you executed. In 5.2 it just shows insert instead of the entire command. But in 6.1 we've got that bug fixed. So when 6.1 is released and you use it, you'll be able to see the exact command that was executed. You can have a debug view in your form so that you can go check these things as you're developing, or yeah, if you really were having problems with a form, you could use copy table and copy this execution history into the main data source of your form so that when your user saved it, you could go back and actually see what went wrong. Very powerful stuff. When we inject qRules, we inject a code DLL, an XML file, and a schema into your template. It overwrites it. You want to save a copy first, and you can manually remove qRules from a template. It's a matter of removing the code DLL, removing any rules that you have, setting the command field, and then removing the data connection. Pretty straightforward. Sorry, it's not automatic, but you know, not everything in this world is perfect. So I'm going to show you a quick demo of installing the full trust forms that come with qRules. So let me just do that real quick. And so when you install qRules, it's going to probably be in Program Files x86 or Program Files. You go and you find it. Let's take a quick look at what all we get here. And we have the injector. We have documentation here. These are the DLLs, so if you're writing code and you want to use qRules with your code, here's where you find those DLLs that you can reference. Okay, and here's our forms, and here's our installable forms. So if you want to use Forms Installer, it's as easy as drag this onto this. Now I'm going to go ahead and make sure I've got info path closed first. All right, close info path first. Drag, drop. Now this makes me nuts, but if you say no here to this first install template, then it's going to give you the option to remove your form. So, you know, right now we want to install it. We're going to say yes. Okay, and we wait, we pretend like we're patient. We wait. Okay, success. It was installed. So you can use this with these forms. You can use Forms Installer wherever you want. Honestly, just, you know, if you have a full trust form in your organization that you're having people install on their machines and you're using JScript or something like that, just give them your full trust form in Forms Installer and the instructions, you know, close info path, drag and drop, and make your life a little easier. Feel free to reuse that guy. So let's look at what form files look like before and after injection. And I'm going to pop up a form and then look at the files, and then we'll inject it. We'll take a quick look at it. Just bear with me here and I'll get that set up. Okay, so here is my form. I'm going to expand it. I use 7-zip. It's free. It's simple. Just extract. Boom, here is my template files, right? So you can see here on my plain template files, it's just a simple form. I'm going to inject him. I'm going to drag him over here, hit inject, say yes to the prompts, yes to the success. Okay, and you can see what was added here. We added this and this and this, and we made some changes to the manifest file. We added references to these things so that when you open the manifest, it knows about them. Okay, so that is what we add when we inject. Now let's take a quick look at this execution history stuff I've been telling you about. So if we go into design, here's our Qdabra rules data source. Here's our regular error node, lets us know when we do something wrong. Here's our execution history. So if we drag this over onto our form, we should see then a list of all the commands we've run, results, success, and error. And you know what, I didn't do this in class, but I'm going to go ahead and do this just because it's fun. There we go. I'll preview here, and then let's try some stuff. So my first command is going to be generate quit, right? And you can see here's my command and my result and all that. And now my second command is going to be date diff. I'm not going to include parameters, right? And you can see that I don't get a result and I get an error. And now I'm going to include some parameters. I'm so glad that these forms have this autocomplete. And there we go. All right, and so you can see now how I can look at this and see exactly, you know, what was returned. I've got a 0 result because of the way I use the command, but this gives you an idea of that execution history and how powerful that can be for you for debugging and troubleshooting. And like I said, if you copied that into a main data source, you know, at the close, all you'd have to do is add basically the same data structure to your main form, and on submit, before you submit, copy table, right? Copy that in, and then you'd have that in your main data source in your XML if you had a problematic form and you were trying to figure out what the heck was going wrong. So that could be super powerful error handling for you there. So that's the execution history, and I'm going to see what else I have left. Here we go. My list of useful tools. These are freebies. So 7-zip. I use 7-zip all the time for extracting XSN files. It's, right click and select expand. Notepad++, install that XML plugin. It gives you nice syntax highlighting. If you're writing XML, it gives you some autocomplete stuff. I use it all the time. Fiddler, fantastic tool, lets you see the web traffic you've got going to and from your InfoPath form when you're previewing it or using it in filler. This can help you debug some stuff. It can be very useful. This online XPath tester, use it all the time, and so because I'm not a natural at this, I wasn't born speaking XPath, so yeah, it's an excellent tester. There's an online XSLT tester that I have not tried. I use Visual Studio. So here's a spoiler alert. You're going to watch me really fat finger through some of this later today. Because my Visual Studio 2010 install somehow doesn't have the XML tools I need any longer. But I'm going to totally ruin this for you. I saved the day with Visual Studio 2013. This URL decoder, I encourage you to check it out, if only for the small print. It makes me laugh every time. My everything else decoder is the Coder's Toolbox. It'll encode and decode base 64 and things like that. Very, very handy. And then if you've ever done validation where pattern matches XYZ, pattern matches LMNOP kind of thing in InfoPath, there's a regex tester you can use that can help you with that as well. So at this point in the morning's training, we went into an intro lab, and then after that, I remembered to push the record button. So I'm going to splice this together so we have something that's a little more complete, and thanks for your patience. Okay, so now I've got recording going, and I'll just re-record the first half of this and glom it onto this later. So on the site, what I've got here is this is a 2010 blank form that's been injected with qRules. So if you do not have qRules installed on your machine and you don't want to install the beta, this has a 6.1 beta injected into it, and it's a blank form. It's a 2010 form. We'll take a pause to look at another lab here in just a couple minutes, and when we do that, I'll get a 2007 version injected and up, and it'll say blank injected form 2007, and that way you guys have a couple blank forms you can use if you need them. Okay, and what I should have been more clear about was what's going on inside these lab folders. So if you open up a lab folder, our next lab is going to be lab 4. I do not have separate instructions for 2007. We did the training and rolled it up to 2010 a few years back, and I'm not even sure what the state of the 2007 training is. So if you're using 2007, you're going to have to make some little leaps when you're reading through this training, okay? But hopefully it's not too far removed. So inside your lab folders, you're going to see some materials to help you. Some of these are like in progress versions of things. Usually I think the one that I've named with the full name of the module is the completed version of the thing, so that you can compare that to the lab or compare it to yours and see what's going on. In the 2007 folder, I've created and saved 2007 versions of the things, but since I don't have a 2007 version of the training, you're just going to need to try to wing it, try to follow along with what we've got here. Holler if you've got questions. Okay, and so yeah, anybody who is having trouble opening the labs or getting to these documents, let me know. If you need me to at a later date, I'll pull everything down, zip it up, and get it to you. So but if you've got some sort of a block on your side, firewall or something like that, that's the way these things go sometimes. It's not, we cannot foresee every eventuality. I know you all know that. Okay, so let's go ahead and roll forward and talk about template parts. I should have done a poll. Who all uses template parts? Chat me real quick in chat and let me know if you're using template parts. I have a love-hate relationship with template parts. The programmer in me loves the idea of reusability, right? Because that's the whole concept of when we're writing code. We want to write these nice reusable functions and methods and be able to use them again and again and again. And so the idea behind template parts, I think, is great because they are supposed to give us this level of reusability, so we don't have to rewrite everything over and over again. And I'm seeing some of you are using them. Some of you have been, trying and been frustrated. Yeah. Pete's like, I use them a little, finds often he has to adjust them, but it does make things easier. And I'm with you, man. I think they make things easier in general, but they have to be adjusted. I hate what they do to my schemas, right? So I hate when I inject a template part and it makes a mess of my schema. That just annoys me. I hate the way they create these dumb names for data connections, right? When you have a secondary data connection in a template part and you put it in a form, it appends like the name of the template part to the data connection. And I understand why they did that, but man, it just makes me crazy. So there's some things I really don't like about them. I would like to like them more than I do, okay? And so the idea is you create your template parts and then you can reuse them again and again in a bunch of forms. And they should help you with things like standardization, right? You can not have to reinvent the wheel with some of your logic again and again and again. So for some of these things, they should be helpful. I don't find that they always meet their promise. But that doesn't mean they can't be useful. And we do use some internally. And one of the things we like to use them for is with qRules, sort of a, how do I phrase this? Sort of as a structure, kind of a helper. You can create a template part that you can use with qRules in the terms of it provides, it's almost like a self-documented unit that allows you to have some consistency where you may not have it otherwise. Okay, now if you try to inject a template part with qRules, you can test your logic, right? You can preview your template part, you can make sure your logic is all working. That's great. But if you then try to use a template part that is injected with qRules, it's going to get a little crazy, because when you add the template part to the form, it can change the node names and the data source names. And then all of a sudden you have Qdabra rules underscore my template part name instead of the actual Qdabra rules data connection that qRules is expecting. And we also can't we can't really have code in a template part, so your DLL is going to get stripped out when you inject it. I'm sorry, when you add the template part to your form. So we kind of have taken a different approach with template parts in qRules, and that is, since you're going to have to do some cleanup anyway, it's easiest to just use dummy nodes for your rules in your template part, and then you just change those rules to use the form nodes after you add your template part to your form. So I realize that is really oblique sounding, so let me try to express that again and see if I can do a better job. So already, if we had injected qRules directly into a template part and we then added that template part to a template, we're going to have some cleanup to do. There's going to be some messiness. Since we already know there's going to be cleanup to do and there's going to be messiness, what we're suggesting is don't even bother injecting qRules into your template part. Set up your template part, kind of maybe test it by adding it to a form that has qRules injected and making sure all your logic works correctly after you adjust your rules. But set up your template part without qRules. Use some dummy nodes in there that you use for your rules, where set this field to that, set that field to this. And then you can add directions to your template part to kind of make things easier when users add them. So as a form designer, as somebody who uses qRules, this gives you the ability to create, for example, some template parts that your non-qRules colleagues can leverage, right? All they have to do is have the injector on their machine so they can inject the form. They use this template part, they follow the directions, and then they too now have a template part that uses qRules. So let me pop open one of these. I just want to show it to you real quick, and then I'll let you guys look at the lab, and then we'll move on. So with earlier versions of InfoPath, we should be able to right-click this and select Design, just like we do a form, right? We right-click, we select Design, it opens in design mode. For whatever reason, we cannot do that here in InfoPath. I think in 2010, this stopped working the way a normal human being would anticipate it would work. It has not been fixed. So right now I'm saying I want to open something in design mode. I'm here. I don't see my template parts. That's because of this filter. You can see it's only going to show me those two. Right? I changed the filter. Now I can open one of these, just so you know, for opening one of these to take a look at it. So now I've popped it open. Now, and you can see I've got usage instructions here. And we're saying, you know, we want to use the rules on date to field, modify those to use the Qdabra rules command and result nodes. The component should be set to correct component, operation should be set to desired operation, amount to add should be set to blah, blah, blah. This table cell should be deleted, temp delete group should be deleted. So what we've got here in our template part is we've got this little group that we're calling temp delete, so that the form designer knows to get rid of this, right? And we've got a command field and we've got a result field. And so here on date 2, we've got rules. We're saying get difference. We're saying set a field's value, set command to blah, 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 set value to result. So once I add this template part to a form, what I can do is I can take my form, which has been injected with qRules, I add this template part, and I can just modify these two little rules. I can say, okay, instead of setting this command field, I can do this. I can navigate to the Qdabra rules data source, select the correct command field, and just say okay a couple of times, and now I've got my rules set up. So hopefully you can see that this might help you. Let's say you've got 3 other people who also design forms. They've got qRules installed on their machines. They can inject forms, but you know they're not really using qRules. So now you can set up like a save to SharePoint template part, give them some directions, and then all they've got to do is add the template part to their custom controls, right? We just do this, add or remove custom controls. Da-da-da, thank you. Say add, right, template part. We browse to it, we add it. They can add it to their custom controls. They can add the template part. They can follow your instructions to configure the logic, and then they're up and running. They've got qRules in this form. It's working. They're using save to SharePoint or whatever it is you were hoping to save them time with. Obviously, this is not the most elegant of solutions. It would be great if we had a template part that we could just put in the form and it would just work. But unfortunately, due to some of the limitations with template parts, we found this for us has been the smoothest option. Okay? So let's go ahead, and I want you guys to take a look at this lab. It's lab 4, and so just to be clear, it's here in this lab 4. Here is the lab itself with the instructions right here, create a qRules XTP. This has the XTPs already added to it. These are the 2 finished XTPs. You can take a look at those. The 2007 folder only has 2007 versions of the InfoPath materials. Okay, so the directions are here. They aren't 2007 specific. They're 2010 specific, but hopefully they at least make some sense and you can walk through some of this. So 10 minutes is not going to be enough to complete this lab. I know that, but I'm going to give you guys 10 minutes so you can at least kind of look at the lab, pop up if you have any questions, if you can't access something, and then we'll move on to our final section in lab for the morning. I promise you tomorrow is going to be slightly less complex stuff, so if this stuff is kind of like, oh my god, when am I going to use this, or oh my goodness, this is crazy, or I don't see the purpose of this, trust me, tomorrow we're doing copy table, we're doing encrypt, we're doing some stuff like that you're going to be using more more often. And following this lab, we are going to talk about input parameters as well as transforms. So I'm going to go ahead and pause, stop recording, holler if you have questions. We'll kick back up at 10:10-ish. Okay? Okay, so we're going to go ahead and move on. You can definitely review that lab, download it. You guys can let me know if you have some follow-up questions or anything like that, because I understand that we're not actually leaving enough time to get through all the labs. But I would rather share information now and have you work through labs maybe later, and then you guys can always email me. I'll have my email address on the last slide. You can always email me and say, hey, I didn't quite get this, I didn't quite get that, and I'm more than happy to give you a hand. I just wanted to make sure you had an idea of a methodology for trying to use qRules in template parts. And again, like I said, It's not a perfect solution, but working within the constraints of the software, which is InfoPath, I think it gives us at least an option for it. I just wanted to leave this up for a second. Let me start sharing my screen again. There we go. So you'll see now I've added to our lab files a blank injected form for 2007. So I just dropped them here at the root of the documents folder. You know, grab that if you need that for following through with some labs or something like that. It's just a blank form, has qRules injected 6.1. Save it locally and use that as your starter form for some of this stuff if you need it. Okay, so hopefully if you don't have qRules installed, that gives you an approach. All right, we are going to go ahead and move on. Now, this next little piece is complicated, and I'm not going to pretend like it's not, but part of it is not terrible. The first part is pretty easy. So this is input parameters. So maybe pop a note into chat. I know it always shows up as questions, but pop in a note to chat or questions. If you're using the get input parameters command, I use it a lot, and the reason I use it a lot is I think it gives me a lot of control over the way a form is going to behave. I can provide, for example, a particular link that has an input parameter, and then that allows me to go look up maybe data from a database or data from a SharePoint list or something like that that I would like to display in the form. You can use input parameters with the command that allows you to set the default view. So let's say, for example, that you have a form where you would like one view to show up for your HR department and another view to show up for your sales management team. You could have a link to the form on the sales management team page that included an input parameter of and view equals sales department or and view equals HR. And then you can use the qRules command that switches the views, right? And sets the default view, and display the correct view based on that. So you can do quite a bit with input parameters, and they're very useful. And I want to show you how to, in fact, I think I've got a slide on this later, but rather than moving on to the next slide, I want to go ahead and show you how to test these, okay? Because one thing I see a lot is I see people publishing their form to test this command, to test get input parameter, and you don't have to. You can test an input parameter from the command prompt. Let me go ahead and pop to, here we go. So here is my demo form for input parameters, and I'm going to go ahead and right click this guy, select design. Now in qRules in general, what we would like you to do is, instead of using form load rules here, we would like you to instead put form load rules that call qRules commands here on finish loading. And if finish loading is equal to true, then you want to execute your qRules command. Why? Why do we want you to do this? We are trying to make your life hard. No, the reason we want you to do this is because the order of operation in an InfoPath form is rules run before code. qRules is code that we're triggering via rules, okay? Rules run before code. So if I have a form load rule that is using a qRules command, there is a chance that that rule could execute before the code DLL is completely loaded. Okay, so while you may have forms where you've used form load rules with qRules commands and those have worked just fine for you, there's no guarantee that they are going to work for you. Whereas if you add it to the finish loading node where finish loading is equal to true, then we know for sure that the code has finished loading, because the last thing that code DLL does as it loads is it sets finish loading to true. Okay, and so in general, I suggest we suggest strongly that your qRules commands that you want to have execute on load go here on finish loading, and that's why. So let me make this a little wider so we can actually see everything I'm about to talk about, so I'm just not, you know, working blind here. Oh, that's nice, isn't it? The way I made that so big and the other so small. Okay. So here's the command, get input parameter. The key I'm passing in is test, and here is what I'm doing with it. I'm setting field 1 to result. You guys know now you could use result XPath and actually set field 1 directly instead of doing this. In fact, you know what? Let's just delete that. And, oh, I forgot that I'm lazy. Let me copy that XPath real quick. Copy XPath. How could I have forgotten that I'm lazy? I mean, we might as well change this, right? We might as well make this use some slightly nicer logic. And so then this would be what? Result XPath, I have to spell it right, equals, there we go. So now I can use the result XPath instead of having those two rules. So that kind of shows you one way we can kind of clean things up. Now, what does this take away from you if you take this approach? This takes away error handling, right? Because, I guess it doesn't really take it away. I'm being overly dramatic. Because what I was going to say is we're not really checking now to see whether or not we had an error before we do something. But frankly, if there's an error, the result's going to be blank, so it's going to set field 1 to blank. So that could be a problem for you. I mean, if field 1 had been set to something else, and now there's an error, and well, I don't know that field 1, sorry, I don't know that field 1 would get set to blank. Actually, field 1 would not get set to blank. Nothing would happen to field 1 because we don't use this result XPath until the command has executed successfully. So you could check for an error after this, and that error would let you know if get input parameter had failed or not. Sorry for the aside, which I imagine was quite confusing. So this is our get input param test, and we're going to pass in an input parameter of test, and that's going to set field 1 to whatever we pass in. Now, I'm going to save. Let me Control S. So I'm going to save because what I'm going to do here is I'm going to run this from the command prompt so we can test our input parameter. And one thing I frequently do when I'm doing this is I forget to save my form in between tests. So I have the command prompt open, I've got the path in that I need for running this, and then I've forgotten to save my form. So I'm wondering why my command prompt isn't running correctly. So I think I've got the right path here, and so we open up command prompt. I usually run as an admin because I'm a geek and I run things as admin, and I know it's bad, but you know, it's the command prompt. I don't know if you have to run as admin to get this to work is what I'm trying to say to you, because I just always run as admin. So we change directories, we go to the folder that has info path. You know, we start typing in info path and we hit tab, and that brings up the info path exe. I'm going to hit a space. Now the next argument I want is I want the path, the full path for this. Windows 7, and guys, I don't know about Windows 8. I'm sorry, I'm such a slow adopter of Windows 8. I'm scared of it. If you really strongly think Windows 8 is cool and you love it, maybe drop me a line and let me know, because I'm still just quivering in my boots about upgrading. So at any rate, at least in Windows 7 here, if I hold down my Shift key and right-click my template, I have copy as path. Okay, and again, this is just a sign of my ongoing laziness, because if I copy as path, then I've got the full path and it's in quotes. What do you know? That's just what I needed. So I'm going to hit space. So now come my arguments. My argument is input parameters. Now, if I had more than one input parameter, I could wrap them up in quotes and separate them with an and symbol. I'm going to go ahead and put mine in quotes right now anyway. So it's test equals, I don't know, hello, right? Okay, so what should happen? When I hit enter here, what should happen is my form should open up and field 1 should say hello. Okay, so we're just going to hit enter and see what happens. Waiting, waiting, waiting. Oh, this is exciting. And nothing happened. All right, let's find out why. Get input parameter, arguments, key, other, details, security exception. Oh, hey, what a fun learning experience this is. And look, I thought I had updated. Oh, I didn't update the version in this guy. Okay, that's all right. The one I've got updated on my machine is in a different folder, but that's okay. So the problem I've got here is a security exception. We started seeing this in InfoPath 2013. Sorry, that's not what I want to do. And that is that I'm going to need to set this as full trust for my input parameter command to work in preview. When I publish it, it can go back to domain trust. So I'm just going to say OK and save. And let's see if this does it. If it doesn't do it, then we're going to just go ahead and sign the dang form. Nope, look at that. What a brat. OK, let's sign it. There was, oh, maybe we changed that. Okay, we're going to go ahead and we're just going to use a different version of this form. Thanks, guys, for being patient. At least I trust you're being patient with me. I want this to work, but I think I injected this one with the latest. So it's module 6. Oh, it's not the demo form. All right, that's fine. We we are going to open the wrong tool again. Guys, is it Monday for most of you? I hope so, because that'll make you more patient with the fact that it's Monday for me. Tools, qRules, injector. Let's go inject that demo form. And I think this is something that we got fixed. I'm pretty sure it is. So in a later version of qRules, and it's just that I had 4.3 in that guy that was the problem. So we're going to find out very quickly here. If not, you guys just have to trust me that this is the right way to test these. Whoops, and I left it as full trust. One more try, and then we'll move on. At any rate, I find this is easier for testing than actually publishing and checking, just because then I can really kind of tweak with what I'm passing in as far as my input parameters go. And I'm going to say save. We're going to try one last time. Then we're going to just go ahead and give up and call it Monday. Opening form. Hey, you guys, I win a prize. All right, so here's another bug that's been fixed over time. Obviously, between 4.3 and 6.1, we improved our 2013 compatibility, so we don't get a security exception with get input parameters. So you can see now we're setting field 1 to hello. My other parameter was named other, I'm pretty sure. And let's just take a quick look at that guy. Finish loading manage rules. Get other parameter. Oh, and you guys did see then that I was getting that field set. And here's my other parameter, field 2 equals result. And that's for other. So if I do this and just add to it, let's do up arrow, backspace, hello, and other equals bye. Right, and hit enter. We should pop up hello, goodbye. Okay, so I just wanted to make sure you understood that you can test input parameters from your local machine. It's not in preview. You're actually opening the form, but from the command prompt. Because if you were using a URL for this form, you would have, whatever the URL is, question mark, test equals hello, and other equals goodbye. You'd click the link would open up the form passing in these parameters. And if you're using browser forms, yes, absolutely, at some point you are going to need to test your stuff in the browser. You can't have any complete faith that if it works in Filler, it'll work in the browser. But this is another tool to put in your toolbox, and that is you can test input parameters from the command prompt on your local machine. And this is so much easier. I leave the command prompt open if I'm working on the form with input parameters. I leave it open. I make my changes. I try to remember to hit the save button. And then I just go ahead and I execute my command prompt again using the up arrow to copy it down again. And so do keep that in mind if you're using input parameters. That's going to be the easiest way to test them. And input parameters give you a lot of power. There's a lot of things you can do there in terms of looking data up, trying things, and so forth. This lab that we're not going to have time to walk through, but that you can certainly walk through on your own, also includes a transform. So this lab includes a get input parameters command, and then it transforms the data. I don't know how many people are familiar with XSLT. If you've used or written any XSLT, maybe pop it in the chat. The thing about XML data, one of the beauties of it is, you've got your data. It's in a structured format, and you can write an XSLT to go ahead and take this XML data and basically convert it. You can say, oh, this node that's called my customer here, I want it called TNS colon username there. I want to make X into Y, Z into B, and I want to move these things around. And you can use XSLT for all of that. And the transform command allows you to say, hey, take this XML and change it. Apply this transform that's in my form to it and change it so that it's this different XML. It's extremely powerful. It's extremely useful. I use it sometimes, like tomorrow when Bree goes through some of the copy table stuff with you, she's going to talk about kind of a complex scenario where instead of just using the copy table command, you're using insert and some additional rules to basically take data from a secondary data source and copy it into your main data source. Honestly, since I use XSLT pretty comfortably, I'm more likely to write a transform and use a transform command than I am to use this kind of insert copy methodology. So it's very powerful, and it's certainly something to look into. I'm going to skip this slide because we just talked about this, right? How to test your input parameter logic via the command line. This URL right here is the old InfoPath team blog. It talks about this, and you can take a look at that. I do want to show you using Visual Studio to debug XSLT. One of the tools I mentioned in that slide that had a list of tools that I use a lot. I mentioned an online XSLT tester, so if you don't have Visual Studio, that might be a good way to go for you. I just want to kind of show you what that looks like. And so we're going to pop open Visual Studio. I'm sorry I didn't already have that open because it's not fast. And we'll do File, Open, File. And we're going to go find our training file. And here we go, and lab 6 is the one we're talking about here. Okay, here's my XSLT. So I'm going to open this guy. And so here's my XSLT. And now what it's saying is, hey, find me this node, right? And return for me this node. You can see it's got a different namespace with the value of title from this node as the company name and the value of contact name from this node as contact name and so forth. We can apply this. Let me show you what my sample data looks like here. Here is my original data. Now what I did, just so you guys know, is when I needed this data that showed me what this guy looked like, I went ahead and just copied it out from my form files, right? So I saved my form files and then I opened up, I probably opened up either sample data, right, or I might have opened up one of these customers XSDs, that's my data connection, until I found the basic structure I needed, and then I copied it over and I threw in some test data so that I had a sample. So, you know, that's one thing. If you're testing an XSLT, you might have to make a copy of some data or dummy up some data that has the same structure as what you're pulling in your secondary data source. So to debug this, we would just do XML. All right, come on. We should be able to do XML. Why? Oh, why, oh, why, Visual Studio, you're being like this. What we should be able to do is go from XML, and there should be a little button there that I'm not seeing right now. Let's see if it's on my slide. Yeah, it shows it right under XML, Start XSLT Debugging. So let me see if I have to have a solution open for that, and then we will just move along here. Let me just pop open a solution and see if Visual Studio will behave itself. If not, I've obviously broken something because I do that on a regular basis. And let's do File, Open, File, back we go. Oh, beautiful. Training qRules. Sorry, guys. I swear to you, this is really impressive. I'm sure you're just waiting with bated breath. Let me open this and try one more time. XML. No. Okay, so for some reason I seem to have managed to uninstall those tools. At any rate, let's close that and let's just try a different version of Visual Studio, if you guys can bear with me for another minute. While we're waiting for this to open, yeah, okay. I will answer that question in a second. Open, File. This was, you know, like one of those things where I was like, oh, well, I certainly don't need to walk through this because I do this all the time. But now that I think about it, maybe it's been a while since I've done it in 2010. Perhaps that's where I'm going awry. XSLT, and it opens, and XML. There, hooray. Okay, so obviously my multiple Visual Studio installs has created some problem for me. So from here I can do Start XSLT Debugging. It's going to ask me, hey, what's the XML you want to use? I grab my XML file and say Open. And now what we should see here is what this XML is going to look like once it's gone through this transform. You can see I've got a lot of junky white space up here. That's not a big worry. I've got multiple root elements. Okay, so I can see I'm returning then, instead of a single root element, I'm returning a snippet here of XML, right? You guys can see that this doesn't have a root element. So it's a snippet, and that's why it's not, being seen as valid XML, is because it doesn't have a root element, but it's working okay for what we're doing in the qRules lab. So at any rate, this kind of shows you how the transform took us from this, right? This is what we had, and this is what we're getting back. In the case of this particular qRules lab, Lab 6, you're going to see that this is what we need. Now, a couple of brief things about this lab. If you're InfoPath 2007, there's going to be parts of this you cannot do, and that is because it includes customizing a SharePoint list form. And if I recall correctly, we cannot do that in 2007. So my apologies for that. But you could still create a form that uses get input parameters and uses transform. It just wouldn't be, oh, I'm going from this SharePoint list form to this other form scenario. Okay, so feel free to give that a try. The other thing is since these labs used to be in a different order, when you open Lab 6, it will say, oh, use the lab you created in, or use the list you created in Lab 2. Don't. Just create a list using the qRules training list template. It has 5 entries already in it. Throw your initials on there to give it a unique name, but go ahead and just create the list from that template. It'll have a few items in it, and you can go from there. So try to give that lab a try if you have a chance later today. I know I've spent most of this time talking. You guys get a cupcake for being patient with me. We've had somebody ask about qRules 6.1. We are still testing it, and so if you install that beta that's available on the site, it's on the training site under Documents under qRules. Be aware documentation isn't updated yet, so you're not going to be able to easily find the new stuff. But it is in beta. We are working on the testing. And it is going to be available soon. And as far as being able to update or upgrade, I think it's a 1-year upgrade. For those of you who are asking about being able to upgrade from 5.1 to 5.2 or 6.1 or something like that, I think probably the best person to get a hold of is going to be Janice. So if you guys need Janice's email, let me know. I have one person requesting that I email the labs and the 2007 forms. Absolutely, I will zip those up and try to get those to you. We'll chat a little bit about the best way to get those to you, Doreen. I'll email you on that, okay? So let me get you guys, Janice's email is, if you guys need to ask a question about upgrade eligibility, it should be Janice, Sarah. I don't know why, and I have a hard to spell last name, so I'm always like, I don't know why people have such hard to spell last names. Isn't that awful of me to even think that way? Let's make sure I've spelled it right here. Qtzera. So yeah, if you've got a question about your upgrade eligibility, do email Janice. If you have a question about labs, you need help, you're going to try these and you get stuck, does qRules do this? Can qRules do that in the future? Right? Any of that stuff, I want you to email me. Please feel free to email me, and we can talk about these things. I'm going to go ahead and go to the last slide because it also has my email address on it. Does anybody have any additional questions? I'm sorry I didn't leave you guys much time for the labs. I just really wanted to get you the information that you're not going to get from labs. And so hopefully this was useful to you. Tomorrow you're going to have Bree. Bree's going to go through some of the more commonly used commands like copy table, save to SharePoint, and she's going to do a lab with you guys on encode and decode. And if you haven't used encode and decode, they're kind of cool. We use them internally for some password protection. And I see that we've got some love for the cupcake. I tell you what, if I could have cupcakes for breakfast, I would. Brian, you and I, let's talk offline. You ping me an email, and we'll figure out what you've got going wrong. Doreen, I'll get you some materials. Everybody else, thanks for coming. And I was so glad to see we had a big class today. And I think tomorrow's session with Bree and Thursday's session with June and Ernesto are going to be great. We're going to talk on Thursday especially about some of the improvements that Jimmy has made to the mapping tool and to submit to SharePoint list, so you're not going to want to miss those Thursday morning. Have a great day, you guys. I'll quit talking your ear off. And again, email me if you've got questions or concerns. Oh yeah, you can have the site. Oh yeah, somebody was asking about, will the site be available? You guys, that site's going to be up. Your passwords and usernames are not going to be changing. Go grab whatever you need to grab. If you guys want to get busy and download all that stuff so you've got it locally, go get it. Absolutely. So yeah, you've got access to it all day. Okay? All right, you guys. Thanks. Peace out. We'll talk to you very soon. Bye-bye.